Welcome back to the show. I am Carrie Cohen, your host. I've been a practicing psychotherapist for 25 years and a nervous system and attachment expert. I work with women and couples all over the world. So I am happy you are here. Today, we are talking about reconnecting with yourself to strengthen your marriage. So, a lot of the work I do is with women in marriages and also couples. And I am a big believer that part of your work on your marriage is your work on yourself. And you if you work on yourself um and you work on your marriage, your chances of actually having the kind of marriage that you desire, the one that you want to create, is your chances are much, much greater. And the reason for that is because when we bring together, I always like to think about marriage as if you think about the Venn diagram. So if you're listening to this on audio, you're not going to see my hands, but it's the two circles and then the two circles overlap. So if you could think about the two circles as partner A and partner B, and then where they overlap, that is the couple. So there's a third entity, partner A, partner B, and the couple. So I think about it as three entities. All three need attention if we want to maximize and optimize the success and the possibility for you and for your relationship. So I'm a big, big believer in this. I think that there are times when marital work, joint work is necessary. Um, but there are plenty of times where working on yourself, as opposed to being in couples therapy per se, working on yourself is enough. Because I will say, always when you work on yourself, it has a ripple effect on your marriage and on your family in the positive direction, unless you're working with someone who's not holding that in mind. And in that case, if you want to stay married, I would encourage you to make sure you're working with someone who is also holding in mind and that the work supports the fact that you're in a relationship. So, let's dive into this. Let's talk about reconnecting with yourself to strengthen your marriage. So, what do I mean by that? What does it mean to reconnect or just connect with the self? A lot of this is easier for women over men. See a lot of women who want to do this work and husbands who don't. And what happens is you run the risk of outgrowing your partner. It's actually, which is the other reason why if you're doing solo work that they hold in mind that you also have a partner. You don't want to outgrow your partner. And that is possible. Um and so it is something that I will touch on in this episode, how to do this work while keeping your partner in mind. Now, you might be doing the self work and self reflection work and then bring it into your marriage, which you can also do. Bring it, to your partner and say, "Hey, I want to do this." Now, I've also worked with actually men, solo men, working with men solo who are married whose wives didn't want to do the self work, and so it does go both ways. A little more common in the other direction than it is in the latter. But anyway, let's dive in. So, if we think about reconnecting with yourself, let's talk a little bit about like just self-awareness in marriage. Like what kind of place does it have? What's the role there? So if we think about self-awareness, we're talking about really just knowing what your emotions are, what your values are, and then those behaviors and how they impact your partner and relationship dynamics. So um how do you feel about something or a given thing? And then how does that manifest in reality? Can you connect those dots? And then what is the impact that that has on your partner and on the relationship dynamics? So, one of the things that I've come to think about over the years is how am I being experienced by others, by my partner? Not by all others, but by others who are important to me. How am I being experienced by them? And am I being experienced by them in a way that is aligned with how I see myself and how I want to see myself? So, we're not thinking about if we're being seen by how this other person needs to see us. So let's go back to this in marriage. Okay. So are you and your partner aligned on values? Are you and your partner aligned on how you want to live out your life, how you want your marriage to feel, how you want your marriage to be experienced by each of you? So these are questions. So if we're saying, like, you're doing this work yourself, this is an example of something that you could actually bring back to your partner and you can have this conversation. You can even listen to this episode jointly. In fact, that's what I would recommend over anything else. And stay tuned because my husband and I are going to be doing a few joint episodes that probably will be coming after this episode, I think. So that's when we're thinking about self awareness. So when you have an understanding of your emotions, your values, your behaviors, connect those dots to how they manifest in reality and how they impact your partner and your marriage, that then allows you, it creates the space for you to identify negative patterns like conflict, avoiding conflict, escalating conflict, blaming, um, not taking blame or accountability, things like that. And starting to replace them with healthier approaches. So, those are some things that when you have the self awareness, you can start to implement some new strategies around patterns that aren't working. All couples, I would say, have at least a few recurring patterns that don't work for them in their marriage. This is an easy way to start to pinpoint them. Okay. One of mine was, in full transparency, I would correct my husband about how he was doing things. Now, I'm going to do an episode on how our upbringing shape us, but I'll just give you a little preview of that. So, um, we both grew up. So I grew up in a home with parents who were way more obsessive compulsive. Like, I wouldn't give them the diagnosis. They don't meet the diagnosis, but they definitely had more obsessive compulsive type personalities. Very clean, very neat. We couldn't eat anywhere but in the kitchen. Now that's not a uncommon rule. We couldn't wear our shoes in the house. We couldn't wear our shoes on the grass. It was fairly extreme. Um, and I brought that to my home, but I'm not as extreme. We can eat in other places other than the kitchen table. I don't like when people wear their shoes in their house, and you can definitely walk on my grass. Okay, that's just a snippet of how I was raised. My husband was raised fairly similarly, but um the thing in his house compared to my house is I don't think they called it out. They weren't like, take your shoes off, or hey, don't do that, or hey, you're not allowed to do this. I don't think they called it out like they did in my house. So my house, strong Italian, Catholic, loud family. His house, not so much. Um, More quiet, funny, humorous, in the moment, present type of family, different dynamics. So, okay, bring two of us together. I would always point out when he would do things incorrectly. And over time, this created a problem because he started to feel emasculated. I talk about that in another episode. He started to feel like he wasn't doing anything right. He couldn't do anything right. And actually, it started to make him really mad. And we would get into this pattern where then I couldn't point anything out without him saying, I'm doing it again. And he would say, you're just doing it again. And then I'm like, well, how do I point anything out? Like, I can't even like comment on something. And so we went through that stage for quite some time. And that was the point at which he said that he was going to record me so that I could hear my own voice, tone, and words. And so I really started to pay heavy attention to how I was being experienced by him because I didn't want to be experienced like that. I didn't want him to feel like I was this tyrant running around pointing out all of his flaws and all of his mistakes. Because frankly, if I put myself in those shoes, that's a terrible feeling. Nobody wants to feel that way. So the self awareness is really important. And I meet with couples, some of which are able to say, yeah, I know I do this, this, and this, and that's a problem. And others which say, like, no, we're fine. We're fine. We are fine. Now, the person who's saying we're fine, that to me is really a resistance against looking at the areas where you're not fine because yeah, we always have areas where we're fine and areas where we're not fine or we're not okay. There's always places for improvement. It doesn't mean anything necessarily about the future of your marriage, but could if you decide not to work on it. But for the moment, I would say just give yourself the space to have that self awareness, to use it to both evaluate how you are in your marriage and how you are with your partner and what your partner's experience of you is. Do you want them to just experience you as being a good provider, a good parent? Like, yeah, he's a good dad, he's a good provider. Or he's loving, he's caring, he sees me, he feels me, he gets me. What do you want? Right? The latter, of course. Who doesn't, right? Um, okay. So how do you start to get this self-awareness? Okay, so some things I like. First off, you and your partner can listen to this episode together and start having this conversation. That's one way. Um, other ways are spending some time reflecting on these things. I have a marriage meeting. If maybe I will actually put that in the show notes. Actually, I'm going to put that link in the show notes. It's a marriage meeting roadmap. I will put in the show notes. It's a very short, abbreviated example of what I give to the couples I work with. And so you could use that. You could use this episode. You could use that. You could also read books. One of the books I like is John Gottman's 8 Dates book. You could read that. And these are all opportunities to start to have discussions with your partner. And when you have these kinds of discussions with your partner, these are substantive discussions. They're not about like what needs to be cleaned or future planning or money budgeting. It's none of that. It's really all on the growth and development of us as individuals and our marriage. So you could also do it in that way. So those are three. Okay. The marriage meeting roadmap, listening to this episode together, and reading a book together or a chapter out of the book, like John Gottman's 8 Dates book, which I love, which also has questions in the back. Okay. Um, so beyond self-awareness, we're talking about reconnecting with yourself to strengthen your marriage. So beyond self-awareness, what else? I always say prioritizing self-care. Oh, self-care. This is not just baths and manicures. Um, and for me, actually, they're not at all baths and manicures because frankly, I make myself take a bath at least once a week because A, it helps with my muscles, but B, it's an opportunity for me to slow down because if I don't, I just keep going. And I don't love getting my nails done. It's a chore, but I do because I want to keep them looking neat. So neither of those are actually self-care for me. So if anyone said that they were self-care to me, I would say those are not part of my self-care. What is part of my self-care is other things that I'll get into. But when I talk about self-care, it's actually not selfish. It's foundational for individual well-being and relationship health because when you're depleted, it's harder to show up fully for your partner and your family. And I always say, take care of yourself and your partner and your kids will thank you. So, yes, I do make sure I get my workouts in if they're scheduled and we're going out somewhere. Now, we were on vacation. I didn't work out once. I just didn't feel like it. And I usually don't work out on trips. I didn't work out. I ate what I wanted. I drank what I wanted. Like that just felt like that was what I wanted to do. Same thing with my husband. He normally walks daily. He didn't. He got to the place where he was losing time. He was like, I don't even know what day it is. It's pretty hard for my husband to get to a place where he doesn't know what day it is. And that's great, actually. So that is self-care. Sleeping in, letting yourself sleep in, waking up without an alarm. That's part of my self-care. My workouts are part of my self-care. I look forward to doing them. They make me feel good. Other forms of self-care, though, social time, meeting, dates with friends. My husband has a group of guy friends that he gets together with. They watch football, they go out, they smoke cigars or whatever, they grab a beer or something. I like to go out and get a glass of wine with girlfriends. We um chat on the phone via text. We also do that thing where we send memes to each other, funny memes. So that's all self care. It's funny. Other self care is watching funny shows together, watching comedy together, going out on date nights as couples. That's couple self care. I'm trying to think of other things that I like to do. I like to read my book. So if I'm feeling in a funk or I'm like feeling like I need to rejuvenate, I might go outside. I might read my book. I like to go explore new coffee shops, get a tea, things like that. Definitely getting proper sleep is self-care. And other things, some people might go to therapy. You might like to journal. You might like meditating. Um, and the other form of self care that people oftentimes miss is boundaries, setting boundaries around work, setting boundaries around social commitments. Sometimes I will say yes to everything because they sound really great. I want to do them all. And then I look at my calendar and I'm like, oh man, I just like cluttered up my weekends. And I need to have, for me, white self care is also having white space in my calendar. So self care is whatever makes you feel how you want to feel, makes you feel spiritually connected, makes you feel grounded, makes you feel excited, makes you feel lit up, whatever it is, all of that is self care. Um, and so, yes, it benefits your marriage too. I am really big on two partners making sure that they are taking care of themselves so that they can also take care of their marriage. So, that might be listening to this episode together. That might be going for a walk together. That might be date night. That might be watching a show together. It might be cooking together. It might be having meals together. My husband and I, we have pretty much all our meals together. We usually have breakfast together unless I'm doing my workout at the time, but we always have lunch together and we always have dinner together. When we were both working out of the house, we didn't have lunch together, but we always had dinner together. And so finding those opportunities that work for your family, because remember, we're talking about self care for each of you and self care for the marriage. So when you can also do these things, like if we think about hobbies and stuff, when you can allow yourself, I have clients who they start to rekindle their love for different hobbies because it makes you also feel like a more well-rounded person, and it gives you some more fuel to show up in other areas of your life with your kids, with your partner. And so hobbies like, I don't know, taking up jujitsu, pickleball, um open mic night, book club, going to the yoga studio, whatever your hobbies might be. Some of those might be joint, but a lot of those might be just solo activities that you do that make you feel grounded again. And there is actually a lot of joy in getting yourself feeling grounded and anchored, and then showing up into your relationship and being able to show up the way that you want to show up, right? So that's what this is all about, reconnecting with yourself to strengthen your marriage so that you are showing up in your marriage how you want to show up, right? Let me see if there's other things. Okay, so here's some other benefits. It actually will make you more resilient during conflict. Conflicts for my husband and I don't last long. We bounce back pretty quickly. And that is really one of the things that I work on with a lot of my couples. It's not like to not have a conflict, it's that can you have that bounce back period be pretty short so that it doesn't knock out a few hours in your day or a half a day, right? And then you start to think about conflicts as becoming an opportunity for growth, as opposed to looking at them as like, ooh, what does this mean about our marriage that we're having a fight about this or we keep fighting about this? It's really more their opportunities for growth. And when you start to prioritize caring for yourself and caring for your marriage, you can really begin to create this beautiful interdependence. So, we need enough dependency in marriage, not codependency. We need enough dependency in marriage. And we could think about it as an interdependence, which is supporting the independence of the individuals, the two parts, and the dependence of the two, the joint. So, that is another benefit of this. So, I encourage you, as you're listening to this, we're coming up on the end here, to take action. Uh, Decide on something you're going to do for yourself and something you're going to do for your relationship. And if there's not enough self awareness around emotions and behavior and how that manifests and how your relational dynamics are playing out, then I would actually start there. And I would start there by listening to this episode. And then I might move to creating a weekly ritual where you spend about 20 minutes checking in on your relationship with each other, checking in on your states of mind. Where's your mind been? Here's where my mind has been. And thinking about this all in the service of being able to build and sustain the kind of marriage that you want to have that feels really good to both of you. So check the show notes for some of those links I told you about. And with that, that concludes today's episode. Have an amazing rest of your day.